Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle. It's Wednesday, and it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Wednesday Whimsy is, of course, a short show that I do every Wednesday where I talk about a board game topic, or something kind of related to that, whatever I happen to be thinking about at the time. So today I'm going to be starting kind of a new tradition where I'm going to be doing what I'm going to be calling the quarterly Qountdown, where we will talk about, or I will talk about, 5 games that are sort of the 5 best new to me games that I have played during the past calendar quarter. So it's the end of March 2023 right now, which means sort of 3 months of new to me games. Basically, I play a lot of games, and at the end of the year, I often do a final list. But I figured, what if I talked about some of the games as I'm playing them? Obviously, in a top 10 list, there's only room for 10. Uh, Although I guess I did a top 22 list last year. So, I guess I can expand the parameters. But I figured if I talked about games as I'm thinking about them, while I'm still excited about them, while they're still fairly fresh to me, it might end up being an interesting presentation. So, with that in mind, we're going to get started. I'm going to be telling you about the top 5 games I played during quarter 1 2023. That is January through March 2023. So let's get started with my number 5. All right, my number 5 is a game that was new to me. It was kind of a surprise, and I played it for the first time on the Dice Tower Cruise. So let me see. The game is called Rebuilding Seattle, and it's kind of an odd duck of a game. Let me see if I can figure out how to share the screen here. There was something a little bit weird earlier today, but hopefully this will work. Let's see what we've got here. Share screen. Yes, this is very exciting behind the the scenes of me struggling. So, Rebuilding Seattle is a game. It's kind of a polyomino type game, and really, what you're doing is, I guess, building some polyominoes in a shape that's somehow related to Seattle. I guess there's Seattle landmarks and things like that. I don't know what happened to Seattle. I'm sure it's described somewhere, but that's not really relevant. What you're really doing is manipulating this board here. So each person's going to have a board, and they're all different. They're largely the same, but in terms of these sort of 3 laws, these special abilities, those are going to be different on each person's board. On your turn, you're going to take an action. Your action can be to buy one of these cards from a market, which will give you a token, a tile you can place into your board. You can activate a law once per round, whatever it is. And you can also, there are some event cards that are going to be the kind of game timing mechanism that are going to score some particular thing. So you could also choose to activate one of those. You do it and you're done and you move on. When all of the scoring events have been activated, the round is over, we start again. Sort of the core, though, is, as I mentioned, we're placing the polyominoes, but also you're trying to move these quality track tokens up. Because, for example, when the orange quality thing scores, when the orange event happens, you're going to look at where you are on this track. And as long as you are ahead of your population marker, you're going to get a whole bunch of points or money, depending on which track it is. But you're trying to keep this population marker down, because when it's higher, if the population marker passes your scoring marker for that attribute, you're going to score fewer points. So you're manipulating the population, and you're also trying to increase the way that you score in one or more aspects. The game itself is not a perfect game. It's got a couple of problems. The first problem is the setup is absolutely nightmarish. You have to organize and sort all of these polyomino tiles each time you play. The game does not come with any easy way to store them. I have purchased an insert for mine, so I have them sorted now, which makes the game actually playable, because having to sort those each time was a super pain. Also, the game's kind of ugly. I don't know that there's a whole lot of love to be had for this just bright, garish color scheme. And then the biggest problem, though, for me is when you play with more than 2 players, you're going to start adding these extra boards with cards, which makes more cards available. That's great, but it ends up being that all these you've just got three, four, five different, well, I guess four, 3 or 4 different boards of cards you've got to manage, and there's no way that everyone's going to be able to see them because they're written in size 2 font. So I do wish there had been a more clever way to keep things going in the game without just making it impossible to process. That said, the game itself is pretty good. The pacing's great. It's fun to kind of fill up your board. And also, unlike some games, you don't have to build adjacent to stuff. You can just put things where you want them. And there are reasons why you might want to do that that kind of comes from the various scoring mechanisms that are happening. A lot of fun to be had and experiment with. Although it's not much of a looker, it is my number 5 on the Qountdown, Rebuilding Seattle. Let's move on now to my number 4. Right. So my number 4 is a game from Board Game Mad Scientist. Oh, it looks like I'm still sharing my screen. I got to be careful with that. Friedman Friese. And the game, of course, as you can see, is Findorf. So Findorf is another kind of an odd game. I guess I'd describe it as an engine building style game. What you have is a really ugly board that's kind of pointless. Honestly, the only part of this that really matters is these 2 tracks that keep track of sort of some additions and subtractions from the market and also are the timing mechanism for the game. The rest of the board is kind of pointless and kind of ugly. You've got ugly cards with bad art on them. Lots of great things I'm saying about this game. But what I will say about it that's a good thing is that it's a lot of fun. It's really one of those games where you can just do whatever you want, try different things, experiment a little bit. On your turn, you're going to kind of use this action tracker, and so you'll do an action. For example, I could do this action, and you'll see there are now 2 spaces there. It means I can do the action twice. And you can buy more of these little bonus tokens so that the actions that you're doing become more and more powerful each time. Then the next turn, I could do the same action again, or I could move up to I believe 4 steps. And I could do this action, or this action. But if I go past the bottom of this board, I'm going to wrap around and do what the game, for whatever reason, calls a bureaucracy phase. It's really an income phase. I think we need to excise the term bureaucracy to mean income from our gaming lexicon. But either way, it's an income phase. You'll do a little bit of resetting, but you can kind of very much customize how strong your actions are going to be and focus on what you want to do. The other kind of big thing in the game is these cards, which are buildings. You start the game with 5 of them, I believe, so you can build up to 5. You can also, there's a common market, you can swap one out and take a new one. These things are worth 50 points each if you build them. They're all worth the same amount, but they might not all be equal. So you've got to kind of decide which one is worth focusing on and when. But they're going to give you different bonuses. Often they'll give you a lot of money and kind of help you to become more self-sufficient, so you can kind of build the things that are going to get you the most points, other than these cards. But it's just there's a lot of customization in here. You can kind of figure out how you want to do it, set your own pacing. I'm showing lots of pictures of this beautiful game, it looks like. Anyway, that's kind of what it is, but I found it to be really fascinating and not something that I think is getting talked about a lot, but one that I definitely have enjoyed. Friedman Friese is one of my favorite designers because he always tries something that's a little bit different. His games are almost never lookers, and this one's not a looker, but they usually invoke some sort of concept that he's trying to play with, and often do so in a really interesting way. I will say this game is badly in need of a player aid. There is nothing inherently to tell you what what you can do in each of the different actions. It's in the rules, but you don't want to keep passing the rule book around. I should have had a little player aid that said, if you do this action, you can choose from A, B, C, and D. That would have been nice. I'm sure there's probably one online. Maybe I should look for it. Anyway, that's my number 4, Findorf. And that's the next one on the countdown. Let us move on now to number 3. All right. So number three is another game that I played for the first time on the cruise. Now this one, although I played it was new to me in 2022, it did objectively come out in in 2020. Sorry, 2023. It did objectively come out in 2022. So whether it's a which year's game it is, I don't know that I can say, but it didn't have very wide release. Anyway, the game I played on the cruise, I played it once just to kind of convince myself I didn't need it. And it was so great, I immediately sat down and played it again. I mean, I just set it right up. And every time I've been playing it, that's kind of how I've been doing it. The game is called Federation. So, Federation is a loosely space themed game. It's at its core, it's really a kind of a worker placement type game with a lot of track movement. It almost feels like a space version of Tapestry. So, what you're going to do is you have see if I can find it here. You've got this board, and you've got these these four workers, and the workers have two different sides to them. You can set them up as a voting side, as you can see here, and you can also flip them over. On the other side, there's a funding side, and you're going to place them out. This looks like a slightly different version than the one I have. Must be a prototype. Doesn't matter. You're going to set them out on this action selection board and basically, do the actions. So you've got the different actions you can do. Here's a good picture of it. And regardless of which side you put your worker on, it's going to do that action for you. If you put it on this gold side up, the funding side, you're going to activate one of your special project planets on your board, which will be nice. And I wish all right, how do I mute this thing? Okay, great. Let's see if I can't stop all of the messages that seem to be coming in. Okay, I'm being puzzled by. Yes, please stop. There we go. That might help. Anyway, so you're going to be, regardless of what you choose to do, you're going to you're going to be doing the action. But if you activate it on the sort of gold side, you're going to get to mark a special planet. You're also going to be contributing to a project. And these projects are end game scoring mechanisms. So if the project funds, meaning if you get it all the way to the end, then whoever has the most of that particular scoring will get a bunch of bonus points. So you're going to want to try and make sure that you have not just you want to make sure you're focusing not just on the projects that you want to make sure you're focusing on the projects that you're going to have the best scoring in. Now, I never win this game. I'm terrible at it, but I just always have such a great time. There's a nice sort of balance between whether you want to put things out for their scoring or their funding. Oh, sorry, the voting side, if it's something voting side up, you're going to be voting on these initiatives, which are going to score different other aspects of the board. Many of these actions have you moving up on different tracks. So there's just kind of a lot going on, a lot of things to kind of enjoy and play with here. I just really find this game to be fascinating. I've acquired a copy, but I'm also going to be getting the deluxe edition when it comes out. Who knows when, because, of course, we have a ridiculous pre-order for something. But it's this is a great game, one I really enjoy, and something I was pleased to discover, number 3 on my Qountdown for this quarter. Let's move on now to number 2. Okay, my number 2 is a game that recently it really just showed up. I just got it in the mail. It was one that was on Kickstarter, as many games are. Let's see if I can find it online. Of course, why am I not? All right, for some reason I can't find it. Let's see. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Really exciting stuff. My number 2 is a game that's recently come out about making spirits called Distilled. So Distilled is that's another weird game. I don't quite know how to describe it. But in Distilled, what you're trying to do is, as I mentioned, you're making these different kinds of alcohol. that's the terrible prototype version. And what you're really doing is kind of going out to this market, buying the ingredients that you need, and then there comes a point in the game where you're going to try and distill. So I wish we had better versions of these cards. Anyway, well, I won't show you because apparently I can't find it. But in order to make a spirit, you need to have a kind of a yeast, a water, and some sort of sugar. And there's a bunch of sort of these basic sugars, which can be grain or plants or fruit. And then you can also buy advanced versions of these that will give you more points. And it all kind of comes down to somebody playing solo, which is actually a good way to play this game too. But you've got this recipe card here, and it will tell you, for example, can I zoom in any further? Well, no, apparently that's the answer. But, for example, if I wanted to make soju, I would need to have, looks like 2 grains and nothing else. So what you're going to be doing is first you have to unlock the recipe, and that's one of your market actions. You'll pay money to unlock the recipe, and then you'll put the things that you need into your brewing concoctor thing. I don't know what it's called. Flashback or something. Anyway, and then you're going to shuffle up the cards, and you'll draw one off the top and one off the bottom. Which, okay, that's kind of a hokey rule. You could just draw 2 off the top, but I guess for whatever reason, you're drawing one off the top, one off the bottom, and discarding them. And then at that point and that point only, do you look and see if you have the required ingredients still, because you could have taken off one of the sugars that you need. And if you don't have it there anymore, well, then you're not going to be able to make the liquor you were hoping for. There's always some sort of defaults. You can make the vodka or moonshine regardless of what's in there. There's one will always be available. Then you're going to score the money. You'll get money from the spirit that you distilled, and you'll get points from it, also from the type of liquor and the different kinds of ingredients that were in it. You're also able to upgrade your brewery or your distillery, and you can also save some of them for later. Some require you to age them for a while, but to do that, you need to buy a barrel for them to go into, and then you have to let them sort of sit there. And the interesting thing is, you're only able to do 7 different liquors over the course of the game, 1 per round. Doesn't matter how much stuff you've got, you're limited to distilling only 1. So if you decide for whatever reason that you don't want to sell one because you're going to age it, you're not selling anything that round probably, unless you had something from a previous round, which means you won't be getting the capital injection that you need. So there's a lot of interesting choices in this. I was really quite taken with it. The rule book's kind of clunky, but but it does a great job of explaining everything. And once you get into it, it starts to feel very natural. It's a very interesting mechanism. This kind of almost push your luck. So you might want to put more things in there to guarantee it, but then you might be wasting them, and you have limited ability to go out and get new things. It's just really interesting. I've had a great time with it. A really nice surprise, even though it only came in just about a week ago. I played it a couple of times already, and I've really enjoyed it. So that's my number 2 on the Qountdown, Distilled. So let's go on now to find out what my number 1. I meant to say is, and then I cut myself off with the numbers there. So my number 1 is a game that was also on Kickstarter, and I got it on Kickstarter. I still haven't actually received my copy yet, but I bought it through the Kickstarter just because it sounded interesting, and that's sometimes what you have to do. Many of these things, if you don't get them when they're first available, you might not get them at all, or you might have to wait a long time. But the game is an engine building type game. I talked about it when I was talking about Dice Tower West last time. And the game is called Earth. So Earth is kind of like a weird combination between Ares Expedition and Wingspan. It's probably the best that I could describe it as. But what you're doing is you're building this 4x4 grid of cards, and the cards are all going to work together with different abilities. There's 4 different colors of ability. Well, more than 4, but there's 4 different actions. So on your turn, if you're the active player, you're going to select one of the 4 actions, the green, the red, the blue, or the yellow. And then everyone else also gets to do that action. And then after you've done that action, you're going to start and you're going to run your board top to bottom, left to right. You might have some on your sort of player mat as well, but you're going to activate any of the special abilities that you want. And these abilities will let you sort of turn things in for other things, get different bonuses, and you just kind of doing this thing. And so you can build yourself like an engine that works really well with the blue action, for example, which does not look like the one in this example. But then every time blue happens, you're going to get a whole bunch of things, including if someone else activates it. So you've got a lot of customization in here. There are sort of common goals that you're going for. You've got individual goals, a bunch of different ways to score, and that's kind of what you're doing, but it's just so fascinating. Also, because everyone's doing the same action each turn, there's very little downtime once players get a handle on sort of what things do. The first time you play with people, there might be a little of, shaking hands, or wringing hands, shaking head, wondering, okay, so just too many choices. But when you sort of distill it down to which main action you want, okay, that makes things a little bit more manageable. It's a really great game. I played it with a couple of different player counts, all the way up to 4, and even at 4, it did not feel too draggy, so that's good. There's also a good solo mode, and I mentioned I don't have my copy yet. I played it at Dice Tower West a lot, and then it's also available on Board Game Arena, which is a good implementation, helps you keep track of things very nicely. Anyway, lots of ways to score. Very high scoring game. You're going to be in the 200s just because of, everything's getting you a whole bunch of points. But a really good, and, although the artwork isn't anything all that exciting, the gameplay is really good, and the artwork complements the cards. It's not too big or too small and doesn't get in the way. Anyway, a really good game, really easy to learn and to teach, and just a real star of the year so far. Although clearly I've had a great quarter with my games, because I've talked about 5 games for over 20 minutes already, which means that we're going a little bit too long. Anyway, that's my Q1 Qountdown. I will be doing this again, I guess at the end of June is my plan, when a second quarter has been going. These games I will consider ineligible because they will no longer be new to me. But that's kind of what I have planned. I hope this is an interesting kind of mini series within my mini series. If it's not, well, too bad. I mean, maybe if nobody likes it, I might stop doing it, or I might not, because I might not care. Anyway, that's that for today. I do think there are a lot of great games coming out this year, and obviously I've found a lot of love in some, and I had many more I could have talked about. Maybe I'll talk about them next time if I'm still feeling great about them. Either way, there's a lot of good games to go out and play, a lot of good things to try and experiment with, and I hope you will do so as well. I'd love to hear in comments, if you feel like making them, what your favorite games from Q1 are, or games that were maybe out last year but you sort of tried for the first time this quarter. Anyway, that's the end of the Qountdown, and it's the end of this episode of Wednesday Whimsy. So I'm going to wish you safe travels and courage when you need it, and I will see you again next week for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. Bye-bye.